if we make this decision wrong, this is a
make or break the project.
5-6 figure redo.
We've bought what's left of a falling down farm in Scotland with around 20 acres of land, and together we're trying to put it all back together again into a beautiful family home, and in the process share it with you guys. If you never want to miss an update, hit the subscribe button and that bell icon. But for now, let's see what we got up to this time.
So that wasn't even recorded?
You're sacked.
Was that not recorded?
No.
Dan, where are you going?
Leaving you. Get out right now.
It's the end of
you and me. Come back, I need you, or I will be.
Dan, can I ask for something kind of major, if that's all right?
Reduce the swearing, because people get the knickers in a twist.
Can you just try and make it not every sentence? We're gathered here today to ask for help. Dan would like some help. Give me this so I can... Come here. Why is it not turning?
Just double... Right, what have you... Right, Jess.
What's it doing?
Double tap your trigger. Double tap the trigger. This trigger here. Oh. Double tap it. There we go. It's like magic.
You're really tall.
You just realised. We're doing this video to get advice from you guys on the internet as to what we should do in terms of weatherproofing and insulating the main farmhouse. I'm going to play with flaky paint.
No.
Because this is part of the issue.
Yeah, well, yeah.
This is part of the issue.
Okay, please.
It's not weather sealed.
No, well, no, but now we're just making more holes for water to get in. Right, okay.
Just go free and this is what happens. I just start getting distracted. And
Dan, you need to stop. Dan, no, because this is what happens when you get nervous. Dan, right, here you go. This intro's getting really long. Do you mind?
Who?
The birds.
It's nature.
I know, I love it. We're having insulation situation. Now, we would usually have just taken advice, done all the research, picked an option and ran with it. However, Dan would love to have some input from anybody who has done a similar project before or lived in a property that's had one of these options done to it. Okay, so that's like the main thing that we're looking for is experienced advice. So advice with living experience of it in some way, shape or form. That would be something that we are really looking for, and that's something that doesn't really exist on the internet. Okey dokey. These walls that are in here are super thick stone. So we're not talking like cavity walls, modern houses or anything like that. They're literally chunky slabs of rock. They're about, I mean, the thinnest ones are about sort of this size. The thickest ones are about this size. So they're super deep walls. Now, just as a little bit of how houses like this work, because it's very important for insulation choices, is there isn't anything there to stop moisture getting in or out of the building. Paint can give a weatherproofing, but if the maintenance isn't upkept or if the wrong type of paint's applied, then, or it's not primed properly, then you can end up with flaky paint and disasters happening. The wall essentially lets moisture come in from the outside, but what it also does is then when it's nicer, warmer weather outside, then the moisture will evaporate out of the wall. So it's like a fluid system. The same thing from the inside. So vapor on the inside, moisture from steam, cooking, etc. Can move into the wall from the inside and eventually evaporate either out of the wall outside or inside or whatever. So that's how it works. The biggest issue that most people will see with solid wall houses is if they try and disrupt that system without thinking about it carefully, it can cause exceptionally fast wall decay, mould and all sorts of other condensation and damp problems. Creating a thermal barrier is a really tricky one to do, especially on a property this size. So we are going to measure the external wall area of this house. The internal ground floor square meterage is about, I think, 150 square metres. Do you think that's wrong?
No, for ground floor, that's probably about right.
Yes, it's about a 250 square metre house, which is, I don't know, big. So if a normal 3-bed semi-detached house that you'd purchase today in the UK is around about 90 to 100-ish square metres, ish. You can tell the sort of scale that we're dealing with, but it's quite a complex building as well. It's not just a box. We live, previously, a solid stone property as well. And that had one of the options that we've got available here done to it, which was to build a house inside a house, essentially, with a timber frame, leave a gap, and then insulate as you would normally internally. The downside of doing this here is that we lose all of the internal features that we love, and the stone. And so that's what's creating this insulation situation, because whatever we decide, we have to compromise on something. Now, some would say, leave the house with all of its features, internal, external, don't touch it, don't insulate it, let it do what the house was kind of made to do, which is what you would do if you were doing, well, it's kind of what you would do if you were doing conservation. We're not doing conservation, we're not doing restoration, we are a little bit, we're doing renovation. This is going to be our family home, and it's going to cost an absolute fortune to heat, even if it's well insulated. So we're trying to make the best decisions for us as a family, but at the same time, I'm keen to not lose the fabric, the feel of the place. And so we have some options for insulation. I'm going to try and walk you through them as best I can with the knowledge that I currently have of them, and see where we end up. So the first thing that we can do is wrap the house in a jacket. So it'll go onto the solid wall, and what it is a breathable membrane, breathable insulation material. It'll come out a fair chunk, yeah, and then it will be rendered on the front. Now this house, for as long as we are aware of, and all the historic pictures and paintings that we've seen of it, has always been either white or cream in colour, a little bit yellowy at one point. And all of the farm buildings, as far as we know, have been white. So it's never been harled, as far as we know, and it's just been painted. So we don't feel we're massively disrupting the external look. Obviously, it will change a little bit. Benefits of putting an external jacket on it is that we can retain pretty much every single internal feature, and it can stay visible as much as possible. So that's a massive benefit. Downside of doing that is mainly the cost. It's extremely expensive in initial investments term. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
So it's about 150 to 160 pounds per square metre at the moment. So it will be really expensive initial outlay, but what it might mean is that we can use less expensive breathable materials and also non-breathable materials internally. In an area like this, where we have solid walls, solid stone, there's a lot like this, and we love it. And from what I can see from the comments, you guys love it too. The issue with having internal insulation and no EWI on the outside is that if we were leaving exposed stone walls, this would be the coldest point by a long stretch, which means that the condensation would always happen on this internal stonework. So it will always be a bit cold and damp because it would be the coldest point. So moisture in the air, in vapour, will travel around a space, but it will condensate, it will turn into water on the coldest area. And then that's when like your mould and stuff can form after that as well. So if we don't do an external blanket, realistically, leaving walls like this exposed isn't an option. The internal options that we have available are, like I said, in the previous property that we lived in, which is to build a subframe, essentially, because these rooms are freaking huge, and run a subframe around the entirety of the property to build a house inside a house with realistically nothing touching the external stone walls where possible, and then insulate that to modern standards. And then that would be plastered with gypsum plaster, so non-breathable plaster. In that situation, it would be like a PIR board or something with a vapor back on it, so moisture can't come into the property from that point. And then your cavity that you would leave acts with some ventilation points, pretty much like a cavity wall insulation. Doing that, you lose all of the space, you lose any features realistically. So that's option number 2. Option number 3 is to utilise a lime plaster insulation. So using lime plaster, and there's quite a lot of modern kind of options available that also set a lot quicker and don't need as many coats. So in that case, we could either use traditional lime methods and lime straight on the hard, so everything just goes onto stone, or onto kind of breathable boarding, which could be used in the internals as well. If we do that option, that is expensive as well. So that's a lot more expensive than modern methods of insulating a property and finishing a property. However, some of the advances in technology are amazing and you don't need so much. So you can use cork board, wood fibre board, mineral wool, all sorts of different things that are breathable and will let the moisture do its thing, but also provide really good insulation, as well as your lime plasters that can be utilised internally. The cost of doing a 250 square metre property with those finishes will be less than, but probably not that far off, wrapping the whole thing in a protective jacket from the outside, realistically speaking. So these decisions we need to start to make now. The other option as well is for the internal dividing walls. So a wall like this, which was just done with the lath and lime plaster, this isn't touching an external wall to a certain point to about here. There can be a vapor barrier on that corner point there if needed, and then run just normal modern insulation methods, which will cut the cost and the time substantially. And the reason why we're asking for help with making this massive decision, and this is a massive decision, is because everything that we do from this point forwards revolves completely around whatever choice we make right at this point here, including things like treating and repointing the stonework on the outside, different parts that we would need to rip out completely that perhaps aren't even in a particularly bad state. Those bits, everything is going to come together here into a massive mixing pot of decision making, and it's a huge decision to make. So far online, from everything that we've found, absolutely nobody agrees on what to do in these situations, and I'm sure that that's also going to be the case here as well. For me, if the house has always been white on the outside, it's not really that much of a difference to stick a blanket round it and make that white as well, with the aim of retaining as much visible structural and architectural features on the internals. That for me seems like the logical option, even though it's the most expensive. That being said, it would be cheaper to not do that. So if it's going to come down, there's so many things that go into this mixing pot, but some ideas would be good. The only thing that we've not really mentioned in my little run through there was EWI. If we do everything externally, that doesn't negate any internal work.
Yeah. So basically what Jess means by that is if we go for EWI, there is still the expense of finishing everything internally, like plasterboarding, plastering, etc. Whereas if we go internal insulation, that's part of the process of internal insulating. Like, but when
you'd have your finish.
Yeah, it'd be a finished room because you'd have your stud work, your framework, and everything, insulation, plasterboard, finished plastering, which I'll do.
It's just like a huge conundrum, and if we pick the wrong thing or the wrong material as well, then it's not like we're just doing one room or like one of the little cottages that we could have, from the grounds of the old cot house that's fallen down over the valley there. It's not like it's a small project. If we make this decision wrong, this is a
make or break the project.
5-6 figure redo. We just can't get it wrong. So those are, I think, are our options available. Obviously, that doesn't negate the importance of having a good hat, a roof insulation.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Really good roof insulation is also going to be super important, because the walls really are the last thing to look at insulating, but we're not going to insulate the floors yet.
No.
As far as at the moment, we're not going to insulate the floors just yet. That will be a few years out, I think. Even though someone's going to be saying exactly what I would be saying, which was like, why? Like, that's the best place you can stick it. There's a few reasons for that, and we can cover that in another video as well. The roof insulation is going to be key. We know that. Yeah. But we also need to try and future-proof the property almost, because if we just go haphazard and slap some gypsum on a wall in a year, it's just going to end in absolute disaster. So we have to make things, just understand the material that is on the wall. A lot of people did say, a couple of people have put in comments to clean the sandstone. This isn't sandstone, so there is no sandstone on the property. But yes, it does all need obviously a clean, and yes, the paint does need to come off the external elevations of this house.
I started that earlier, you know.
You made such a good job of it. So if anybody does have experience in any of those three things, or you live in a house where you know one of those three things have happened, things we want to know are how has it gone? Has it made a difference in terms of the comfort internally? So we don't need it to be 4,000 degrees. This is not a modern home. It's never going to be an airtight bubble. That's just not going to happen. And that's fine, that's okay, but it does need to be fairly comfortable. And how is it handling moisture? Yeah. So mould, damp, cold points, obviously that's going to be relevant to how well insulation was installed. Because if there is any kind of like weak points in corners, on joins, around windows, those are going to be the bits that are going to get mouldy kind of quite quickly. But those things are the kind of things. Do you have any other?
What have you learned from it? And if you could do it again, what would you do differently? Thoughts, experiences?
Regrets?
The more information that we can get, the better.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one. We just want to make the right choices. So maybe you can help with that. If you can, stick it in the comments. Yeah. And be nice to everyone else, because they'll all have different opinions.